Look up at the night sky tonight. What do you see? Distant points of light, constellations tracing patterns across the darkness, the same celestial tapestry that has captivated humanity for thousands of years. But here's something astonishing to consider. While we gaze upon the very same stars that ancient Egyptians observed over 4 millennia ago, they saw an entirely different universe unfold above them. For them, these weren't just distant suns and galaxies, they were gods walking the heavens, divine animals prowling the celestial river, and mystical forces guiding the fate of kingdoms. Their understanding of the cosmos wove together precise astronomical observation with profound mythological storytelling, creating a world so sophisticated that we're still unraveling its secrets today. This wasn't merely stargazing, it was a sacred science that shaped their architecture, guided their agriculture, and defined their very understanding of life, death, and eternity. What's truly remarkable is how the ancient Egyptians integrated their celestial knowledge into every aspect of their civilization in ways we're only beginning to fully appreciate. While we separate science from spirituality, they saw them as inseparable threads of the same cosmic fabric, their temples aligned with solstices and equinoxes with jaw-dropping precision. Their pyramids mirrored constellations with mathematical accuracy that still baffles engineers. Their calendars predicted Nile floods using stellar movements with reliability that modern technology would struggle to match without satellites. This wasn't primitive superstition, it was a complex system of knowledge that allowed them to build one of the most enduring civilizations in human history, all while seeing the universe through a lens that blended observable reality with divine revelation in ways we've largely forgotten. Today, we're going to embark on an extraordinary journey to rediscover that lost perspective. We'll explore how the ancient Egyptians decoded the heavens not with telescopes, but with stone circles and shadow clocks. We'll see how they mapped the stars onto their temple floors and how they designed entire cities as mirrors of the cosmos above. This is more than just historical curiosity, it's a chance to understand how an entire civilization found meaning in the night sky and built their world around that understanding. By the time we're done, you'll never look at the stars or human achievement the same way again. So settle in, because we're about to peel back the layers of time and reveal how the ancient Egyptians saw the universe in ways that continue to astonish astronomers, archaeologists, and dreamers alike. To truly grasp the depth of their vision, we must first reorient our own perspective. For the ancient Egyptians, the universe was not a cold, empty vacuum, but a vast, interconnected ecosystem, a perfect mirror of their world. The sky was a literal, heavenly Nile river, and the Milky Way was its most brilliant and sacred stretch. This was no mere poetic metaphor, it was a fundamental article of their faith and a cornerstone of their cosmology. They believed the earthly Nile had a direct celestial counterpart, and the shimmering band of stars we call the Milky Way was that divine waterway flowing through the night. Just as the Nile's annual flood brought life-giving silt and water to their fields, the celestial Nile was thought to carry the essence of life and divinity through the heavens, sustaining the gods themselves. This profound belief centered on the journey of the soul after death, particularly for the pharaoh. The Egyptians envisioned a complex underworld known as the Duat. This was not a hell of punishment, but a challenging, starlit realm the deceased had to navigate to achieve eternal life. The Duat was intricately linked to the stars, a place both within and beyond the Milky Way. Texts like the Pyramid Texts and later the Book of the Dead served as celestial roadmaps, providing the spells and knowledge needed to overcome the dangers of this astral landscape. The ultimate goal was to reach the Field of Reeds, a heavenly paradise that was a perfect, eternal reflection of Egypt, where one would live forever in bliss. The pharaoh's soul, upon death, was believed to join the sun god Ra on his magnificent bark, a divine solar boat. Each night, Ra would journey through the perilous Duat, and the pharaoh's spirit would travel with him, sailing upon the celestial Nile, the Milky Way. Their journey was a nightly battle against chaos, represented by the serpent god Apep, but with the correct knowledge and the power of the gods, Ra's bark would emerge victorious at dawn, reborn in the eastern sky. By associating the pharaoh with this eternal cycle, the Egyptians ensured his soul would not be lost, but would instead achieve a stellar immortality, becoming one of the imperishable stars that forever circle the North Star. This is why the pyramids were often aligned with such precision to specific stars. They were not just tombs, but powerful launching platforms for the king's spirit, designed to project him directly into the cosmic flow of the celestial Nile and guide him on his final, greatest voyage. This celestial convergence of ideas is perhaps nowhere more perfectly preserved than on a single, massive stone slab, hidden for centuries on the ceiling of a temple in the town of Dendera. Here, we find one of the most breathtaking and contentious artifacts from the ancient world, the Dendera Zodiac. This intricate bas-relief is a stunning map of the heavens, but it is far more than a simple star chart. It represents a pivotal moment in history, a fusion of two great astronomical traditions carved in stone for eternity. The circular carving depicts the constellations we still recognize today: Taurus the bull, Leo the lion, Scorpio the scorpion, but they are rendered with a distinct Egyptian flavor, surrounded by the planets and Deccan stars that were so crucial to their timekeeping. It is a beautiful and chaotic symphony of celestial knowledge, a snapshot of the sky from over 2,000 years ago. The story of its modern discovery reads like an adventure novel. It was Napoleon's ambitious expedition to Egypt at the end of the 18th century that brought this masterpiece to the attention of the Western world. Alongside his soldiers, Napoleon brought a corps of savant scientists, historians, and artists whose mission was to document every aspect of ancient Egyptian culture. When they entered the Hathor temple at Dendera and directed their lanterns upward, they were utterly astounded by the detailed celestial map gazing back at them. The artist accompanying them, Vivant Denon, made sketches that would captivate Europe, sparking a wave of Egyptomania. The Zodiac's fame grew so immense that several decades later, a team employed dynamite and saws to physically remove the entire panel from the ceiling, a destructive act that ultimately sent it on a journey to the Louvre Museum in Paris, where it remains as one of its most prized possessions. What makes the Dendera Zodiac so fiercely debated among archaeologists and astronomers is its very nature. It is a hybrid. It showcases the classic 12-sign zodiac of Babylonian and Greek tradition, but it is populated with Egyptian divine figures and layered with their indigenous cosmology. The goddess Nut, who embodies the sky, arches over the whole scene. The familiar figure of Orion is shown as Sa, the celestial embodiment of Osiris, while the star Sirius is his divine consort, Isis. This has led to a great scholarly divide. Some argue the zodiac is a late addition from the Ptolemaic period, clear evidence of Greek influence after the conquests of Alexander the Great. Others see it as the codification of a much older, purely Egyptian astronomical tradition that may have actually influenced the Greeks. This debate touches on the very heart of how knowledge traveled in the ancient world. Was this a case of Greek ideas being imposed onto Egyptian temple art, or was it the sophisticated Egyptian priesthood integrating new foreign concepts into their own, far older system of belief? The temple itself was built and rebuilt over 1,000 years, and the ceiling likely represents the accumulated knowledge of generations of priest astronomers. The Dendera Zodiac refuses to give easy answers. Instead, it stands as a permanent testament to the fact that civilizations do not develop in isolation. They converse, they borrow, they blend ideas under the same shared sky, creating something entirely new and magnificent in the process. It is a physical argument carved in stone, a beautiful puzzle that challenges our simple narratives about the past and reminds us that the history of science is a tangled and global story. While the Dendera Zodiac presents a beautiful fusion of cosmic ideas, the ancient Egyptians were also intensely practical astronomers, developing some of the most precise timekeeping systems the world had ever seen long before the invention of the mechanical clock. To understand their genius, we must travel to the sprawling temple complex of Karnak, a city of stone dedicated to the god Amun-Ra. Here, under the vault of the night sky, priest astronomers performed a sacred duty that was essential to both their rituals and their society. They became the living clocks of Egypt. Their method was breathtaking in its simplicity and accuracy, relying on the most reliable timepiece available, the unwavering movement of the stars themselves. This system was built around a foundational concept known as the decans. The night sky, from dusk until dawn, was divided into 12 equal periods, and each period was governed by a specific group of stars, a decan, rising just before the sun. Over the course of a year, 36 of these decan groups would mark the passing of the 10-day weeks that structured the Egyptian calendar, but within a single night, the rising of these star groups acted like the gears of a celestial clock, ticking off the hours. The challenge for the priests was how to read this clock with consistency. They couldn't simply watch the eastern horizon all night, they needed a fixed reference point. Their brilliant solution was to use the meridian, an imaginary north-south line running directly overhead, the highest point any star would reach on its journey across the sky. Within the Karnak temple complex, archaeologists believe specific corridors or aligned doorways were designed to frame this perfect north-south meridian line. A priest, likely seated in a fixed position, would observe a specific decan star as it approached this line. He would then use a simple yet ingenious tool, a merkit. This was a small horizontal bar with a plumb line hanging from it, allowing the priest to ensure his sight was perfectly straight. As he watched, he would call out the moment the target star crossed the meridian, aligning with his sightline and the merkit. This transit marked a precise moment in time. Throughout the night, he would track the sequential transit of different decan stars, each passage signaling the end of one hourly period and the beginning of the next. The true marvel of this system was its integration into the very architecture. The walls of certain temples are inscribed with diagonal star tables, long, elegant lists that correlate the transits of decan stars with the date on the Egyptian civil calendar. These were not merely decorative, they were the operational manuals for the priest astronomers. By consulting the table for that particular night of the year, the priest knew exactly which decan should be crossing the meridian at each hour. This allowed for an astonishing degree of accuracy, creating a reliable public time service that regulated the nightly religious ceremonies crucial to maintaining Mat, the cosmic order. This was a clock that never needed winding, never ran fast or slow, and was powered by the eternal mechanics of the universe itself. It was a perfect marriage of divine observation and practical necessity, turning the temple into a monumental astronomical instrument. Of all the celestial bodies meticulously tracked by the ancient Egyptians, one star held a power over their civilization that is almost impossible to overstate. This was Sopdet, known to us as Sirius, the dog star. Its appearance was not merely an astronomical event, it was the trigger for the single most important moment of the Egyptian year, a moment that meant the difference between sustenance and starvation, between life and death for the entire kingdom. While the priest astronomers at Karnak used the stars to mark the hours of the night, the entire population waited for this one star to deliver the time for the year. The event was called the Heliacal Rising, and its observation required a breathtaking level of precision and patience honed over generations. The heliacal rising is a very specific and fleeting astronomical phenomenon. After spending months hidden in the glare of the sun, a star makes its first, brief reappearance in the pre-dawn sky. It is visible for only a few moments, a faint glimmer just above the eastern horizon before the rising sun washes it away. Catching this event required an intimate knowledge of the sky and perfect atmospheric conditions. The Egyptian observers would have known precisely where and when to look, and the first confirmed sighting of Sirius in the morning twilight was a cause for immense celebration and relief. This was because the star's return was inextricably linked to the most vital force in their world, the Nile River. The synchronization was almost miraculous. The heliacal rising of Sirius typically occurred in mid-July, and within days, the Nile would begin its annual inundation. The river would swell, overflow its banks, and spread a layer of rich, black silt across the parched fields. This flood transformed the desert into a fertile garden, enabling the planting of crops that would feed the nation. The Egyptians saw this not as a coincidence, but as divine causality. Sopdet was the goddess Isis in her celestial form, and her tears of mourning for her husband Osiris were believed to be the source of the Nile's life-giving waters. Her reappearance in the sky was the signal that the gods had once again set this essential cycle in motion. It was the ultimate example of their belief that the heavens and the earth were two halves of a single, interconnected system. This celestial event was so fundamental that it officially marked the first day of the Egyptian New Year, a festival known as Wepet Renpet, the opening of the year. It was the cornerstone of their civil calendar, which was divided into 3 seasons, each defined by the Nile cycle: Akhit, the season of inundation; Perit, the season of emergence when the land reappeared from the water and planting began; and Shemu, the season of heat, which culminated in the harvest. The entire rhythm of life, from farming and taxation to religious ceremonies and political planning, was set to this celestial metronome, all ticking to the rhythm of a single star. However, this elegant system contained a hidden complexity that reveals the Egyptians' profound understanding of astronomy. Their civil calendar was simple and consistent, consisting of 12 months of 30 days each, plus an additional 5 festival days at the end of the year, totaling 365 days. But a true astronomical year, the time it takes for the Earth to orbit the Sun, is approximately 365 1/4 days. This means their calendar fell behind the actual solar year by 1 full day every 4 years. Over a lifetime, this shift was barely noticeable, but over centuries, the disconnect became dramatic. The date of the heliacal rising of Sirius, a solar year event, would slowly march through their fixed 365-day calendar. Imagine a year where the New Year's festival, meant to celebrate the flood, occurred while the river was still low and the fields were barren. This is exactly what happened. Over a period of 1,460 years, the calendar would complete a full cycle. The first day of their civil year would drift all the way through the seasons until it once again aligned perfectly with the actual heliacal rising of Sirius and the Nile flood. This grand period is known as the Sothic cycle, named after Sopdet. The fact that ancient Egyptian texts and later Greek historians reference this cycle is proof that their astronomers were not just observers, they were brilliant mathematicians who had calculated this immense cosmic clock, understanding a temporal phenomenon that spans millennia. They lived with the knowledge that their perfect calendar was imperfect, a testament to their honest and advanced grasp of the universe's mechanics, where even the most reliable star could not be perfectly contained by human timekeeping. This deep, almost obsessive connection between the stars and the soul reaches its most breathtaking architectural expression not in a temple, but in a tomb, the Great Pyramid of Giza. For all its immense physical presence, This ancient wonder is as much a cosmic machine as it is a mountain of stone. While its outer majesty is obvious, some of its most profound secrets are hidden within, in the form of 4 narrow, mysterious tunnels that shoot upward from the deepest chambers. For over a century, these features, known as star shafts, have been one of Egyptology's most tantalizing puzzles, and solving it reveals a belief system where architecture became a conduit for the soul's final journey. From the king's chamber deep within the heart of the pyramid, 2 shafts angle upwards through the millions of tons of masonry above. One points due south, the other due north. Similarly, 2 more shafts, slightly different in design, emanate from the queen's chamber below. For decades, their purpose was debated. Were they ventilation shafts, a symbolic holdover from earlier pyramid designs? The breakthrough in understanding their true function came from a simple yet profound realization: these aren't horizontal passages, they are precise astronomical sightlines, frozen in stone. They were engineered not for the living to breathe, but for the dead king's spirit to travel, each one meticulously aligned with a specific, imperishable star that held the key to his immortality. The northern shaft from the king's chamber is aimed directly at the circumpolar stars, the group of stars that, from the latitude of Giza, never dip below the horizon. They are eternal, constant, and unchanging. For the ancient Egyptians, these stars were the imperishable ones, the ultimate symbol of eternal life because they never died, never set, and never underwent the same cycle of rebirth as the sun or other constellations. Egyptologist Virginia Trimble calculated that around 2500 BCE, around the time of the pyramid's construction, this shaft would have been perfectly aligned with Alpha Draconis, or Thuban, which was the North Star at that time. This was no coincidence. This shaft was a direct pathway for the pharaoh's soul to ascend and join this undying, unchanging court of celestial beings, ensuring his own permanence in the afterlife. Meanwhile, the southern shaft from the king's chamber presents an even more compelling celestial connection. It targets the constellation of Orion, known to the Egyptians as Sa, the celestial soul of the god Osiris, the lord of the afterlife and the judge of the dead. The 3 bright stars of Orion's belt were seen as the very embodiment of Osiris. The mythology is powerful here. Osiris was murdered and dismembered by his brother Seth, only to be miraculously reassembled and resurrected by his wife Isis, thus becoming the first mummy and the king of the underworld. By aligning this shaft with Orion's belt, the pyramid's architects were creating a direct conduit for the pharaoh's soul to travel directly to Osiris, to be judged and then reborn, just as the god had been. The pyramid was, in effect, a physical resurrection machine, using the immutable laws of astronomy to guarantee the king's successful transition to godhood. The shafts from the lower queen's chamber add another layer of profound symbolism to this cosmic blueprint. Their original endpoints were hidden behind limestone slabs deep within the pyramid structure, suggesting their purpose was entirely ritualistic, never meant for human access. The southern queen's chamber shaft is aligned with the star Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. As we've seen, Sirius was Sopdet, the manifestation of the goddess Isis, the wife of Osiris and the great magician who resurrected him. The northern queen's chamber shaft, meanwhile, likely targeted the star Kacheb in the bowl of the Little Dipper, another of the important circumpolar imperishable ones. This creates a stunning ritual narrative frozen in the pyramid's geometry. The king's soul, from its resting place in the king's chamber, would take the high road to the male gods of eternity Osiris and the circumpolar stars. But from the queen's chamber, a name which is likely a misnomer, the soul's journey may have begun by first connecting with the divine feminine power of Isis, the essential force of magic and resurrection, and another path to the northern imperishable stars. Together, These 4 shafts formed a complete celestial roadmap covering every critical destination in the Egyptian afterlife. They provided the deceased pharaoh with not one, but multiple guaranteed routes to the heavens, ensuring that no matter what cosmic obstacle might arise, his ba, or soul, would have a clear, unobstructed path to its divine destiny, forever joining the eternal cycle of the stars. But if the star we call Sirius was such a fixed point in their cosmic clock, a beacon of such reliable constancy, why do we find whispers in ancient texts from other cultures that seem to describe it differently? This brings us to one of the most intriguing and controversial theories in the field of archaeoastronomy, the possibility that the Egyptians knew a different night sky, one where their beloved Sopdet shone not as a single brilliant point, but as a pair. Could Sirius, which we now know is a binary star system, have appeared vastly different to the ancient Egyptians, and if so, what would that mean for our understanding of their celestial wisdom? The modern astronomical facts are clear. Today, Sirius is a binary system. What we see with the naked eye as one star is actually 2, Sirius A, the brilliantly luminous main sequence star, and Sirius B, a faint white dwarf often called the pup. Sirius B is incredibly dense and dim, requiring a powerful telescope to be observed. Its orbit around Sirius A is elliptical and takes about 50 years to complete. For most of that orbit, it is lost in the glare of its brilliant companion. The critical question for historians and astronomers is not whether this companion exists now, but whether its properties could have been different thousands of years ago, making it visible to the unaided eye of a highly skilled and motivated observer. This theory was given significant weight by the ancient sources themselves. The most frequently cited evidence comes not from Egypt, but from Rome. The famed orator Cicero, writing in the 1st century BC, referenced even older Greek sources who described Sirius as a red star. Centuries later, the poet Aratus and the astronomer Ptolemy both noted that Sirius was red, a stark contrast to the brilliant blue-white hue we see today. Furthermore, the lore of the Dogon people of Mali, which came to international attention in the 20th century, describes Sirius as having a dense, invisible companion star long before modern telescopes confirmed it, though the origins and interpretation of this knowledge are hotly debated. If these accounts are accurate, they point to a dramatic astrophysical event. A white dwarf like Sirius B is the remnant core of a star that has exhausted its nuclear fuel and shed its outer layers. In its previous life, it was a red giant, a large, cool, and very bright star. If Sirius B was in its red giant phase during the height of ancient Egyptian civilization, the night sky would have presented a breathtaking sight: 2 immensely bright stars orbiting one another, a dazzling celestial pair where today we see only one. Imagine the implications for Egyptian cosmology if Sopdet had a visible, glowing twin. The mythology of Isis and Osiris is fundamentally a story of a divine pair, of separation and reunion. Isis searches the land for the scattered pieces of her murdered husband and uses her magic to reassemble and temporarily resurrect him, conceiving their son Horus in the process. A binary Sirius system, with one star perhaps appearing red like blood or the evening sun, would have provided a perfect, ever-present celestial allegory for this myth. The 2 stars could have been seen as Isis and Osiris dancing together in the heavens, their changing relative brightness over a 50-year orbit mirroring the mythological cycle of loss and rediscovery. Their theology, which already placed such importance on dualities and complementary pairs, would have found the ultimate validation written in the stars themselves. The heliacal rising would then not have been the return of one goddess, but the joyful reappearance of a reunited divine couple, heralding the life-giving flood. However, modern astrophysics presents a formidable challenge to this captivating idea. The timeline for a stellar evolution from red giant to white dwarf is measured in hundreds of millions of years, not mere millennia. For Sirius B to have been a visible red giant during the time of the pharaohs, its transition to a white dwarf would have had to occur within the last few thousand years, an event that would have been cataclysmic and utterly unforgettable. The death of a star in such a way releases an enormous amount of energy and would have been brighter than a full moon, visible even in daylight for weeks. There is no record in any ancient culture of such a spectacular and terrifying event. The alternative explanation is that the ancient observations of a red Sirius were simply a mistake, perhaps caused by atmospheric distortion when the star was viewed low on the horizon, where its light would be passing through more of Earth's atmosphere and could take on a reddish tint, much like a sunrise or sunset. So we are left with a beautiful, unresolved mystery. The theory of a binary Sirius visible to the ancients is a powerful narrative that elegantly connects myth and science, but it crashes against the hard rocks of astrophysical timescales. Perhaps the truth is more subtle. Maybe the Egyptians, with their unparalleled dedication to watching the sky, did notice something we would miss: a slight variation in Sirius's brightness over a human lifetime, a tiny fluctuation that their mythologizing minds interpreted as the presence of a companion. Their knowledge of the Sothic cycle proves they thought in scales that dwarfed a single human life. Perceiving a celestial cycle lasting 50 years would not have been beyond their capabilities. Whether physically visible or spiritually perceived, the duality of their greatest star remains a tantalizing possibility, a reminder that the sky they watched so devoutly may have held secrets that our modern instruments can detect but never truly experience with the same awe-inspired wonder. This deep integration of cosmic order into architecture finds its ultimate expression not in isolated tombs, but in the very temples where the gods were believed to dwell. To walk through the ruins of Karnak or stand before the colossal statues of Abu Simbel is to walk through a monumental astronomical instrument where every corridor, every statue, and every doorway was positioned with a celestial purpose. The Egyptians didn't just build structures to observe the sky, they constructed stone embodiments of the universe itself, designed to capture specific moments of celestial power and channel them directly into their most sacred rituals. Perhaps the most dramatic example of this is the great temple of Ramses II at Abu Simbel. For most of the year, the temple's inner sanctum lies in deep shadow, its four seated statues are depictions of the gods Ptah and Amun, the deified pharaoh Ramses, and the sun god Ra-Horakhti guarding the silence. But on two specific days of the year, something miraculous occurs. As the sun rises on February 21st and October 21st, a blade of sunlight pierces the darkness, cutting through the 200-foot-long corridor. It illuminates three of the four statues in the Holy of Holies, brilliantly lighting up the faces of Amun, Ramses, and Ra-Horakhti. The fourth god, Ptah, remains forever in the shadows as he is associated with the underworld and was never meant to be touched by the sun. The precision of this alignment is staggering. These dates were long thought to correspond with the king's birthday and coronation day, cementing his divine connection to the solar cycle. The entire temple functions as a colossal calendar and a confirmation of the pharaoh's unity with the gods, an event made possible only by the advanced astronomical understanding of the royal architects. When the temple was threatened by the rising waters of Lake Nasser in the 1960s, an international team undertook one of history's most ambitious engineering projects to move the entire structure piece by piece to higher ground. Critically, they went to extraordinary lengths to preserve this exact solar alignment, understanding that to alter it would be to strip the temple of its very soul. This modern effort underscores the timeless power of the ancient intention to forever lock stone and sunlight in a divine embrace. While Abu Simbel captures a specific solar event, the temple complex of Karnak reveals a more dynamic and complex relationship with the stars. Its design is a layered chronicle of celestial observation built up over centuries. The heart of this cosmic function lies in its axial alignments. The main east-west axis of the precinct of Amun-Ra is aligned so that on the winter solstice, the sun would set directly along this sacred pathway, framing the setting sun within the temple's architecture and symbolically rejuvenating the god within. But Karnak's celestial purpose extends beyond the sun. The famous hypostyle hall, with its forest of 134 massive columns, was not just meant to awe worshippers. Its densely packed pillars may have served as a fixed grid against which priest astronomers could track the movements of specific stars as they rose and set through the gaps in the ceiling. This turned the entire hall into a massive indoor star chart. Further evidence comes from the festival calendar reliefs carved onto the walls. These are not merely lists of holidays, they are precise ritual instructions tied to astronomical events. The beautiful Festival of the Valley, for instance, involved a procession where the statue of Amun-Ra traveled from Karnak to the mortuary temples on the west bank. The timing of this journey was likely synchronized with the lunar cycle or the position of certain stars, creating a moving ritual that connected the realm of the living with the realm of the dead under a specific celestial configuration. The temple was not a passive container for rituals, it was an active participant, its alignments triggering ceremonies and its architecture providing the measurements needed to maintain the all-important calendar that organized both religious and civil life. This practice of sacred alignment stretches back to the very dawn of Egyptian civilization. The Sun Temple of Niusera at Abu Ghurab, from the 5th dynasty, features a massive open courtyard with a central Benben stone, a symbolic representation of the primordial mound of creation. The entire structure is aligned to the rising sun, and a causeway connected it to a valley temple, facilitating a ritual journey that mirrored the sun's own path across the sky. Even older are the so-called star clocks found in Middle Kingdom coffins. These diagonal tables of stars are essentially schematic diagrams for observing decaan stars, providing a template that could be applied from any location. This suggests that the precise alignments we see in stone temples like Karnak were the culmination of a much older and widespread tradition of observational astronomy, codified and magnified on a gargantuan scale in permanent architecture. In the end, an Egyptian temple was far more than a house of worship. It was a petrified slice of the cosmos, a machine designed to harness the power of time and the heavens. Its walls were not boundaries but interfaces between the human and the divine, the earthly and the celestial. By aligning these structures with the solstice sun or the rising of a crucial star, the priests were performing the ultimate act of maintaining Mad. They were ensuring that the cycles of the sky, which govern the Nile's flood and the growth of crops, would continue unimpeded. Every beam of sunlight that illuminated a hidden statue, every star that was sighted along a precise corridor, was a reaffirmation that the universe was in balance, and that through their sacred science, they were playing an essential role in keeping it that way. While their temples were perfectly aligned with the sun and their calendars set by the fixed stars, the ancient Egyptians also turned their brilliant gaze upon the most baffling and unpredictable objects in their night sky, the wanderers. We know them as the planets. Without any of the optical aids we take for granted, these priest astronomers not only identified these 5 strange stars that refused to follow the rules, but they meticulously tracked their bewildering paths, weaving their complex movements into the very fabric of their mythology and demonstrating a level of observational patience that is simply staggering to modern minds. Unlike the fixed stars, which moved in a reliable, predictable chorus across the heavens, these 5 points of light, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, marched to their own rhythm. They would slow down, stop, reverse course in a strange loop-the-loop motion we call retrograde, and then resume their journey, all while moving against the backdrop of the familiar zodiac constellations. To a culture that saw divine order in the cosmos, this behavior was not an anomaly to be ignored. It was a profound mystery to be decoded, and they believed these wanderers were the gods themselves walking across the celestial plane, their unusual motions revealing their divine intentions and current state of being. Each planet was personified as a major deity, its physical characteristics in the sky directly informing its mythological role. The dazzling, brilliant white Venus was the most prominent of them all, often outshining every other star and planet. The Egyptians knew it as the crosser, or the one who crosses, a name that perfectly captures its appearance as both the morning and the evening star. They associated it with the goddess Isis, who endlessly searched for her lost husband, just as the planet seems to tirelessly journey back and forth across the horizon. Its intense brightness made it a symbol of divine beauty and maternal power, a beacon of hope in the twilight. The blood-red hue of Mars presented a far more aggressive and terrifying figure. Its rusty color, reminiscent of dried blood and the desert sands, earned it the name Horus the Red. In this form, Horus was not the protective sky god but the fierce and vengeful warrior, the son of Osiris, who battled his uncle Seth for control of the kingdom. The planet's erratic and sometimes aggressive-seeming path through the stars was interpreted as the god's unpredictable and warlike nature, a celestial omen of potential conflict and strife that the pharaohs would have watched with great concern. The largest and most stately of the planets, Jupiter, with its slow, majestic orbit, was given a name that reflected its kingly presence, Horus who bounds the two lands. This associated it with the pharaoh himself, the ruler who unites Upper and Lower Egypt. Its deliberate, 12-year journey through the zodiac was seen as the measured, confident stride of a sovereign surveying his domain, a symbol of stability and enduring power that reinforced the authority of the king on Earth. Perhaps the most challenging planet to track was the elusive Mercury. Always appearing close to the sun, it only revealed itself for short periods in the dawn or dusk twilight, skimming the horizon like a stealthy messenger. The Egyptians named it Sebeg, linking it to Seth, the god of chaos, storms, and the unknown desert. Its tricky, hard-to-predict movements mirrored Seth's chaotic and disruptive nature, a force that was dangerous but also an intrinsic and necessary part of the universal balance. Finally, the slowest-moving planet, Saturn, was known as Horus, Bull of the Sky. Its golden, steady light and ponderous pace, taking nearly 30 years to complete its cycle, suggested immense strength, endurance, and deep, ancient wisdom, an elder statesman among the celestial gods. But their true genius lay not just in naming them, but in charting their most confusing behavior, retrograde motion. Imagine tracking Mars night after night as it moves eastward through the stars of Leo. Then it appears to slow to a halt, reverse direction, and travel westward for several weeks before stopping again and resuming its original path. How do you explain that without the concept of heliocentric orbits? The Egyptians didn't try to explain the mechanics, they interpreted the meaning. They saw this backward loop not as a mechanical process, but as a moment of intense divine activity. A planet entering retrograde was a god pausing in their journey, turning to face the Earth, and actively engaging with human affairs. This period was often seen as one of heightened power, potential danger, or great opportunity, a time when rituals needed to be perfectly aligned to appease or harness that concentrated celestial energy. Their surviving texts, including diagonal star tables and calendar notations, show they could predict these cycles with remarkable accuracy, mapping the complex dance of the gods across the centuries with a dedication that reveals a civilization determined to find order, even in the apparent chaos of the heavens. Yet, if we want to understand how these grand cosmic principles actually touched the everyday lives of ordinary Egyptians, we must turn from the towering stone of temples to a far more fragile, but no less profound, artifact, a 3,200-year-old papyrus known as the Cairo calendar. This incredible document, dating to the reign of Ramses II, is not a royal decree or a religious epic. It is something far more personal, a detailed daily almanac that meticulously maps out the entire year, designating each day as either favorable, unfavorable, or outright dangerous based on the complex interplay of celestial events. It reveals a world where the movement of the stars wasn't just a concern for priests and pharaohs, it was a practical guide for everyone, from farmers and merchants to mothers and craftsmen, dictating the best moments to embark on a journey, to marry, to treat an illness, or even to avoid cutting one's hair. The calendar itself is a masterpiece of encoded information. Each day of the Egyptian year is listed in a vertical column, and beside the date are hieroglyphic annotations that explain its nature. A simple seated god figure indicates a good day, while a menacing glyph of a dangerous animal or a deity holding a knife might signify a bad one. But these pronouncements aren't arbitrary. They are directly tied to the rhythmic cycles of the cosmos. The phases of the moon are a primary driver, with the first, second, and fourth days of the lunar month frequently marked as inauspicious, while the sixth and seventh days are often favorable. The heliacal risings and settings of specific Deccan stars, those same star groups used for timekeeping at Karnak, are also noted as powerful influences on the character of a day. This creates a breathtakingly complex system where the flow of time is not uniform but is instead textured, with each day possessing its own unique spiritual and practical quality based on a celestial fingerprint. For instance, the calendar might declare that the fifth day of the first month of the inundation season is unfavorable because it is the day the Ennead, a group of 9 major gods, were said to be distressed. But this mythological event is itself tied to an astronomical observation, perhaps the specific position of a planet or the culmination of a star. On another day, it might advise against speaking with a mosquito, a seemingly bizarre warning that is actually a coded caution against idle gossip or whispers on a day when the influence of the god Thoth, associated with communication, was considered weakened or distorted by the current planetary alignment. This intertwining of myth and astronomy was a practical science for risk management. Imagine a farmer considering when to plant his seeds. He wouldn't just look at the state of the Nile, he would consult a calendar like this to find a day deemed favorable by the stars for growth and abundance, perhaps a day under the influence of the goddess Renenutet, the serpent deity of the harvest. A merchant launching a trading voyage down the Nile would seek a day blessed for travel, likely one connected to the safe journey of the solar bark through the night. This wasn't mere superstition, it was a system built on generations of observed correlation. If a particular celestial configuration frequently coincided with Nile storms, failed negotiations, or outbreaks of illness, that day would be marked accordingly. The Cairo calendar is the accumulated data of centuries, a statistical analysis of cause and effect written in the language of mythology and mapped onto the movements of the heavens. What makes the Cairo calendar so revolutionary is that it democratizes celestial knowledge. The grand astronomical alignments of Karnak and the star shafts of the pyramids were for the divine king and the state priesthood. This papyrus, however, was a tool for the people. It provided everyone with access to the same cosmic logic that governed the universe, allowing them to harmonize their personal lives with the divine order of Maat. It shows us that the ancient Egyptian understanding of the cosmos was not an abstract philosophy confined to temples, but a living, breathing framework that informed every decision, great and small. They lived in a universe that was alive, intelligent, and communicative, where the stars were not distant balls of gas but active divine agents, and this ancient papyrus was their daily user manual for navigating its beautiful and sometimes perilous currents. Now, if the grand state temples and royal pyramids represent the public face of Egyptian astronomy, then the most intimate and profound expression of this celestial faith is found hidden away in a humble tomb on the west bank of Thebes. This is the final resting place of Senenmut, the chief architect and most trusted advisor to the powerful female pharaoh Hatshepsut. While his tomb is modest compared to the royal monuments he helped build, it contains a treasure that has forever changed our understanding of ancient astronomy, a breathtaking celestial diagram painted on the ceiling, a map of the heavens that is considered one of the oldest and most complete star charts in the entire world. Unlike the later, more Hellenized Dendera Zodiac, the Senenmut chart is a purely Egyptian vision of the cosmos, unadulterated by foreign influence. Painted around 1473 BC, it is a masterwork of both art and science. The diagram is divided into two main sections. The northern panel showcases the circumpolar stars, those imperishable deities that never set. They are arranged in a circle, each represented by a specific deity or a sacred bull, all orbiting the central, pivotal figure of the jackal-headed god. This is most likely Meskhetiu, our modern constellation of the Plough or Big Dipper, which the Egyptians saw as the leg of a bull, an immense celestial pivot around which the entire northern sky eternally turned. This was the realm of eternal constancy, the destination for the most fortunate souls. The southern panel is even more dynamic and complex. Here, we see a procession of decans, those 36 star groups that mark the passage of the night and the weeks of the year. Each decan is personified as a standing deity or a sacred animal, carrying a star and sailing in his own boat across the heavens. This is a literal depiction of the decans as divine timekeepers, their orderly procession ensuring the never-ending flow of time itself. But the chart goes even further, including the 5 known planets, each clearly labeled and shown in their own barks, visually setting them apart from the fixed stars as the wanderers they so carefully tracked. We can identify Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn, their representations confirming their divine identities as Horus the Bull, Horus the Red, and Horus who bounds the two lands. This ceiling was far more than a decorative mural for Senenmut's eternal benefit. It served a critical, active role in his funerary beliefs. In the Egyptian conception of the afterlife, knowledge was power. The journey through the Duat was fraught with peril, and the deceased needed to know the names of the demons they would meet and the paths they should take. By painting this detailed map on his ceiling, Senenmut was arming his soul with the ultimate navigational aid. He would have the entire night sky as his reference, allowing his Ba, or soul, to recognize the decan stars as they rose, to identify the planets in their journeys, and to successfully navigate the celestial river to reach the field of reeds. It was a permanent magical insurance policy for his immortality, ensuring he would never be lost in the vastness of the afterlife. Furthermore, this celestial masterpiece reveals the mind of the man who created it. Senenmut was not just a court official, he was the master architect behind Hatshepsut's magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri, a structure renowned for its precise alignments. The sophistication of this star chart suggests it was likely a copy from a far older, priestly handbook used for teaching and ritual. As an architect, Senenmut would have needed this precise astronomical knowledge to correctly orient the temples and tombs he was building. The same decans he painted on his ceiling were the stars used to determine true north and south in the dead of night. The same circumpolar stars that guaranteed his eternal life were the fixed points his workmen would have used to align the foundations of Hatshepsut's temple with the unchanging axis of the world. His tomb ceiling is therefore a unique window into the practical tools of an ancient Egyptian architect. showing us that the sacred science of the stars was not abstract theory, but the essential blueprints for building a civilization in harmony with the universe itself. Rising from the sacred plains of Heliopolis and lining the great processional ways of Karnak, the monolithic obelisks of ancient Egypt stand as silent, gleaming witnesses to a forgotten science. We often admire them for their sheer scale and the breathtaking precision of their carving, but to the Egyptians, these were not merely monuments to pharaonic ego. They were functional, monumental instruments, the most sophisticated solar observatories of their age, designed to harness the very light of the sun god Ra to measure the passage of time and signal the most sacred moments of the year. These towering stone needles, capped in electrum, an alloy of gold and silver, were engineered to catch the first and last rays of the sun, transforming their long, sweeping shadows into a giant, accurate clock face etched across the sacred landscape. The principle was elegant in its simplicity. An obelisk with its four-sided tapering form acted as the gnomon, the pointer, of a colossal sundial. From the moment the sun peaked over the eastern horizon, the obelisk would cast a long, defined shadow westward. As the sun climbed to its zenith, the shadow would shorten and pivot around the base of the monument. Priests and timekeepers could mark specific points on the surrounding plaza, perhaps with inlaid stones or symbolic markers, to indicate the time of day based on the shadow's length and direction. The shadow was longest at sunrise and sunset and shortest at noon, providing a clear visual representation of the sun's daily journey, but their function extended far beyond telling the hour. The obelisks were also precise meridian markers. At local solar noon, when the sun reached its highest point in the sky, the shadow would point directly true north, offering a fixed astronomical reference that could be used to calibrate other instruments and align temples. This solar observation was deeply tied to the rhythm of religious life. The most important obelisks were erected in the great cult centers of the sun god, most notably at Ionu, which the Greeks called Heliopolis, the city of the sun. Here, a forest of obelisks served as the central axis of the solar cult. Their alignments were critical for timing daily rituals. The shadow's touch upon a specific altar or gateway could signal the moment for a specific offering or hymn to be performed, ensuring the temple's rituals were in perfect sync with the cosmos they sought to honor. The grand festivals of the solar cycle, such as the solstices and equinoxes, would have been dramatically highlighted by these monuments. On the summer solstice, the sun would reach its highest possible apex, creating the shortest noon shadow of the year, an event that could be celebrated as the peak of Ra's power. Conversely, the long shadows of the winter solstice marked the sun's weakest point, a time for rituals meant to strengthen and rejuvenate the aging solar deity for his rebirth. Perhaps the most profound example of this practice can be seen not in a single obelisk, but in a pair, the magnificent twins that once stood before the great temple of Luxor, dedicated to the god Amun-Ra. While one now stands in the Place de la Concorde in Paris, their original placement was a masterstroke of celestial architecture. They were positioned to frame the main entrance to the temple, and their alignment would have ensured that their shadows interacted with the temple's axis in specific, meaningful ways. During key solar events, the converging or diverging shadows of the pair would have created a dynamic, moving spectacle of light and dark, guiding processions and marking the temple as a place where the divine power of the sun was made manifest on earth. The electrum caps were a final touch of genius, designed to catch the slanting rays of the rising and setting sun and ignite in a blinding flash of light, a literal manifestation of the god's presence descending upon his earthly home. In this way, the obelisk was far more than a timepiece. It was a conduit for divinity, a stone pipeline connecting the rituals of earth with the eternal cycle of the heavens. Yet for all the precision of their obelisks and the cosmic ambition of their pyramids, one of the most tantalizing and mysterious structures from ancient Egypt, exists now only in the accounts of awe-struck historians and the faintest traces on the ground. This is the legendary labyrinth of Hawara, a building so vast and complex that the Greek historian Herodotus, who claimed to have seen it with his own eyes in the 5th century BC, declared it to surpass even the Great Pyramids in its astonishing ambition. He described a colossal complex with 3,000 rooms, 1,500 above ground, and an equal number below, all connected by a bewildering maze of corridors and courtyards that was so confusing no stranger could find their way in or out without a guide. For centuries, this account was viewed with skepticism, considered perhaps an exaggeration of a vast mortuary temple. But what if Herodotus was not merely impressed by its scale? What if this labyrinth was not just a temple, but the greatest center for astronomical learning and ritual the ancient world had ever seen? The man behind this monumental project was the 12th dynasty pharaoh Amenemhat III, one of Egypt's most powerful and prolific builders. His reign marked a golden age of organization and centralization of knowledge. We know he was deeply preoccupied with the cycles of nature. His most famous project was a massive hydrological engineering effort to control the flooding of the Fayum Oasis region, where the labyrinth was built. This reveals a ruler whose mind was focused on harnessing natural forces through observation and precise calculation. It is not a great leap to imagine that his desire to control water was matched by a desire to understand the celestial mechanics that governed it. The labyrinth, sitting at the edge of this managed landscape, may have been his ultimate project, a university dedicated to the sacred science of the cosmos, a place where the priesthood could gather, study, and preserve the astronomical knowledge that was essential to the state's survival. The most compelling modern evidence for this theory doesn't come from the writings of Greeks, but from the painstaking work of archaeologists and geophysicists. In the early 20th century, the famed Flinders Petrie excavated the site and found a vast foundation bed of stone, a single gigantic footprint that stretched over 50,000 square meters, confirming the sheer scale that had so stunned Herodotus. More recent geophysical surveys using magnetometry and ground-penetrating radar have revealed a subterranean structure of breathtaking complexity, a grid-like network of walls and chambers buried deep beneath the sand, precisely aligned with the cardinal directions. This hidden underground component is particularly telling. If the labyrinth was designed for astronomical observation and calculation, these sunken chambers would have provided a perfectly stable, temperature-controlled environment, shielded from the wind and the glaring sun, ideal for the delicate task of recording stellar movements, calibrating instruments, and storing precious observational records on papyrus scrolls. We can begin to imagine how this labyrinthine layout might have functioned as a cosmic computer. Its countless courtyards and roof terraces could have served as a vast array of fixed observation platforms. Priests stationed in specific courtyards would have had their view of the horizon framed by high walls, creating a natural meridian line or a fixed window to track the rising of a specific Deccan star or planet. The progression of a star moving from one courtyard's framed view to another's could have been used to mark the passage of time with incredible accuracy. The very confusion of the layout, which so impressed Herodotus, might have been a feature, not a bug, a way to spatially represent the complex and non-linear movements of the planets, the cycles of the moon, and the intricate dance of the stars. Wandering its corridors might have been a form of ritual initiation, a physical journey mirroring the soul's difficult path through the astral Duat, with only the learned priest astronomer possessing the map, the knowledge of the sky, to navigate it successfully. This theory transforms the labyrinth from a mythical maze into the likely heart of Egyptian astronomical science. It would have been a repository for centuries of celestial data, a place where the Sothic cycle was calculated, where the patterns of retrograde motion were meticulously charted, and where the detailed star charts like the one in Senenmut's tomb were first compiled and copied. It was probably here that the precise alignments for temples like Karnak and Abu Simbel were determined, and where the daily astrological prognoses of the Cairo calendar were formulated based on incoming observations from across the country. The Labyrinth of Hawara may well have been the ancient world's equivalent of a national observatory, a university, and a library of Alexandria all rolled into one, a stone embodiment of the Egyptian belief that to understand the universe was to participate in its divine order, and that this sacred knowledge was the ultimate source of power and stability for their civilization. But perhaps the most ingenious and overlooked aspect of their celestial cartography lies not in the stars they saw, but in the profound darkness between them. Where we see the glowing band of the Milky Way, the ancient Egyptians visualized their great celestial Nile, but their vision extended beyond the brilliant points of light. They perceived shapes and figures woven into the very fabric of the galaxy's dark, dusty rifts. This incredible practice gave rise to what modern researchers call the dark constellation theory, a concept that reveals a layer of their astronomy so sophisticated it feels almost modern in its abstract creativity. They weren't just connecting the dots of starlight, they were mapping the negative space, seeing powerful divine forms in the voids and absences that we would simply call empty space. This revolutionary idea centers on their depiction of a figure known as the Celestial Bull. In numerous tomb ceilings and temple carvings, we find a massive, powerful bull depicted striding across the heavenly river. For a long time, Egyptologists assumed this was simply their version of our constellation Taurus. But a closer look reveals a startling discrepancy. The stars we associate with Taurus do not form the outline of a complete bull in the way the Egyptians drew it. Their celestial bull is a larger, more robust figure, and its form seems to be defined as much by the dark lanes of the Milky Way as by the stars themselves. The key to understanding this lies in the specific region of the sky it occupies, near the constellations of Sagittarius and Scorpius, where the Milky Way is particularly rich with dark, obscuring dust clouds. These great molecular clouds, which we now know are vast nurseries for new stars, block the light from the galactic core behind them, creating patterns of blackness against the shimmering background. The ancient Egyptians, with their incredibly dark, unpolluted night skies, would have seen these patterns with a clarity we can scarcely imagine today. They appear to have interpreted one of the largest of these dark rifts as the body of the celestial bull. The surrounding bright stars would then have defined its legs, head, and horns, but the primary mass of the creature, its powerful torso and flanks, was not made of light, but of shadow. This was a constellation defined by its emptiness, a god fashioned from cosmic nothingness. The symbolism here is breathtakingly deep. In Egyptian mythology, the bull was a potent symbol of fertility and chaotic, untamable power, often associated with the god Seth. To see this figure not as a creation of light, but as an embodiment of the dark, chaotic dust from which new stars are born, suggests an intuitive understanding of a cosmic cycle of creation and destruction that is only now being confirmed by astrophysics. They may have perceived this dark bull as a primal, generative force within the celestial Nile, a necessary counterbalance to the orderly, shining deities that populated the rest of the sky. This practice of mapping dark constellations isn't unique to Egypt. Indigenous Australian and Andean cultures have similar traditions. But the Egyptian application of it appears deeply integrated into their core mythology, suggesting this wasn't a fringe idea, but a fundamental part of how their priest astronomers decoded the cosmos, seeing the universe as a perfect balance of light and shadow, order and chaos, the seen and the unseen. This seemingly minor detail, that quarter-day difference, set in motion a slow but unstoppable cosmic drift. Their calendar, so perfect in its simplicity, began to slide imperceptibly through the seasons. Imagine a year where the festival meant to celebrate the life-giving Nile flood arrived while the river was at its lowest ebb, and the fields were parched and cracking under the sun. This wasn't a hypothetical scenario, it was the inevitable reality of their system. The civil new year, the day of the Wag festival, or the beginning of the season of the inundation would no longer align with the actual, observable world. The very foundation of their ritual life, which was designed to maintain cosmic balance, was now fundamentally out of sync with the cosmos itself. This created a profound theological and practical dilemma for the priest astronomers. Their entire society was built on the principle of Ma'at, the divine order of the universe. The king's most sacred duty was to uphold this order through perfectly timed rituals. If the rituals were performed on the wrong day, did they lose their power? Was the king failing in his cosmic duty? The precise alignment of temple ceremonies with celestial events wasn't just tradition, it was believed to be the glue that held reality together. A misalignment threatened not just a poor harvest, but the very stability of creation. The drifting calendar meant the sacred machinery of the state was malfunctioning. Yet, the evidence suggests the Egyptians were acutely aware of this drift. They didn't ignore it or explain it away with myth. Instead, they became masterful adapters, developing a dual-track system of timekeeping. They continued to use the stable, predictable civil calendar for administrative purposes, for recording rains, scheduling taxes, and organizing the workforce. It was the flawless clock of bureaucracy, but for religious ceremonies and agricultural planning, they relied on the observable astronomical year. They never abandoned the heliacal rising of Sirius as the true marker of the new year and the flood. Priests would have continued to make their annual observations and then simply mapped those true astronomical events onto the shifting dates of their civil calendar. This means a festival's date on a temple wall might state it occurs on the first day of the month of Akhit, but everyone understood that the actual ceremony would be performed whenever Sirius was sighted or the Nile actually began to rise. The written date was a formality, the celestial event was the true trigger. This required an incredibly sophisticated and flexible priesthood, one that could hold two conflicting timelines in its mind and know when to adhere to the stone-carved inscription and when to heed the message written in the stars. They became the living translators between an imperfect human construct and a perfect divine order, manually correcting the drift to ensure that every offering was made at the exact right moment to sustain the universe. If the orderly dance of the planets and the predictable rising of the decans represented the divine balance of Ma'at, then the ancient Egyptians also possessed a deep understanding of the forces that threatened to unravel it. In their carefully ordered cosmos, chaos was not an abstract concept, it was a divine entity known as Set, and his influence was written in the most terrifying and unpredictable celestial events. While the sun god Ra's daily victory was assured, the night sky still held moments of profound dread, where the universe itself seemed to turn against its own natural order, and the Egyptians interpreted these events as nothing less than a direct assault from the Lord of Chaos himself. The most immediate and terrifying of these events was a solar eclipse. Imagine the sheer panic that would have gripped the population as the midday sun, the very embodiment of the creator god Ra, was slowly and inexorably devoured by an unseen force, plunging the world into an unnatural twilight. The temperature would drop, birds would fall silent, and the world would be cloaked in an eerie shadow. This was not a simple astronomical event, this was the moment the great serpent of chaos, Apep, had finally succeeded in its eternal mission. The Egyptians believed that each night, as Ra's solar bark journeyed through the underworld, it was attacked by Apep, the priests performed rituals to aid Ra in these nightly battles, ensuring the sun's rebirth at dawn. But a solar eclipse was different. This was a daytime victory for chaos. It was Apep breaking free from the Duat and striking at the heart of the divine order in the world of the living. The temporary blotting out of the sun was evidence that the serpent had swallowed Ra's bark whole, and the desperate cries, drumming, and noise-making that surely accompanied an eclipse were the people's attempt to frighten the monster into releasing their god and restoring light to the world. This association with cosmic evil extended beyond fleeting eclipses and into the very fabric of the night sky. As we've seen, the planet Mercury, with its elusive, hard-to-predict movements close to the horizon, was named Sebeg and explicitly linked to Set. But the red planet Mars, Horus the Red, also carried a double-edged meaning. Its erratic retrograde loops and its ominous blood-red hue could easily be interpreted as the aggressive, violent, and chaotic nature of Set manifesting in the heavens. When Mars was particularly bright or engaged in its strange backward dance, it may have been seen as a period where Set's influence was strengthened, a time of heightened danger for the kingdom requiring potent rituals to restrain his destructive power. Then there were the truly unpredictable visitors, comets. A comet's sudden appearance would have been utterly outside the Egyptians' meticulously recorded cycles. This strange hairy star with a glowing tail cutting a slow path across the fixed constellations was a complete unknown. Unlike an eclipse which ended, a comet could linger for weeks, a silent, smeared scar across the perfect order of the night sky. It is highly probable that such an event was seen as a direct portent of calamity, a divine warning of plague, invasion, or the death of a pharaoh. The comet's tail might have been visualized as the flowing lock of hair of a goddess in mourning, or perhaps even as the fiery breath of a celestial dragon sent by Set to poison the heavens. Its unpredictable path mirrored the chaotic nature of the god it was associated with, a terrifying reminder that the forces of disorder could intrude upon the most stable of systems at any moment. Yet, the Egyptian view was never one of simple despair. The presence of these chaotic elements in the sky did not mean they believed the gods were losing the battle. Instead, it reinforced the critical importance of their own role in maintaining cosmic balance. Every eclipse that ended, every comet that faded from view, was proof that through correct ritual action, prayer, and the pharaoh's divine authority, Maat could be restored. The cosmic battle was real and ongoing, and humanity had a sacred duty to participate in it. By correctly interpreting these ominous signs and responding with the proper ceremonies, the priesthood could help the gods re-imprison Apep, weaken Set's influence, and ensure the sun would always rise again. The night sky, therefore, was not just a map of divine harmony, it was also a battlefield, and the Egyptians were the faithful soldiers enlisted in the eternal war to keep the forces of darkness at bay and the universe running on its sacred, orderly course. This profound fear of celestial chaos makes the sudden and radical shift under Pharaoh Akhenaten all the more startling. In the space of a single generation, this ruler didn't just perform rituals to combat cosmic disorder, he attempted to erase it entirely by fundamentally rewriting Egyptian religion and its connection to the heavens. His campaign was a theological and astronomical revolution centered on the worship of a single solar deity, the Aten, or sun disk. This was not merely a new name for the sun god Ra. The Aten was something entirely different, a visible, physical manifestation of the sun's life-giving power, represented not as a man with a falcon's head, but as a radiant disk whose rays ended in tiny hands, bestowing the Ankh, the symbol of life, upon the royal family. Akhenaten declared this singular entity the one true god, and in doing so, he systematically dismantled the complex pantheon of gods whose identities were woven into the very fabric of the night sky. The motivation behind this drastic shift appears deeply rooted in a desire for absolute cosmic order. Akhenaten's father, Amenhotep III, had already begun to emphasize solar worship, perhaps seeing the untamable, chaotic elements represented by gods like Set as a threat to the stability of the empire. Akhenaten took this idea to its ultimate conclusion by rejecting the entire system of astral deities Osiris, Orion, Isis, Sirius, and the unpredictable planetary gods. He was effectively trying to purge the universe of chaos. He focused solely on the one celestial body whose daily and yearly cycles were perfectly reliable, predictable, and life-sustaining, the sun. In the Aten's unchanging journey across the sky, there were no retrograde loops, no ominous eclipses to be explained away, no terrifying comets. There was only brilliant, benevolent, and orderly light, and he positioned himself as the sole intermediary between this perfect God and humanity. This radical new theology demanded a blank slate, a capital city built from the ground up as a pure sanctuary for the Aten, utterly untainted by the old gods. This city was Akhetaten, known today as Amarna, and its very layout is a masterclass in solar alignment. Akhenaten didn't choose the location for its strategic or economic value. He chose it because the topography of the eastern cliffs formed a natural hieroglyphic symbol resembling the horizon, the place of the sun's rebirth. The entire city was then meticulously planned as a giant solar observatory and monument. The major roadways, temples, and palaces were all oriented on a north-south axis, but their design was deliberately open to the sky, unlike the dark, enclosed sanctuaries of traditional temples that represented the hidden, mysterious nature of the old gods. The most stunning feature was the great temple of the Aten. It was not a dark hall with a roof, but a vast, open-air complex filled with countless altars, designed to be flooded with sunlight. Its long eastern wall was perfectly aligned to welcome the rising sun. The key ceremonial buildings within the city, including the royal palace and the so-called window of appearances where Akhenaten and his queen Nefertiti would distribute rewards, were positioned so that on certain solar events, like the solstices or equinoxes, the sun would appear directly behind them, framing the royal couple in a divine halo of light and visually proving their unique connection to the Aten's power. This obsession with the sun's path even extended to the royal tomb, which was carved into a secluded valley east of the city. Unlike the traditional focus on the northern circumpolar stars, the descent into Akhenaten's tomb is angled so that the rays of the rising sun could travel down the corridor and illuminate the burial chamber. This was a complete rejection of the stellar afterlife that had been central to Egyptian belief for over 1,000 years. For Akhenaten, eternity was not found among the imperishable stars, but in the daily, guaranteed rebirth of the solar disk. His revolution was an attempt to create a perfectly orderly, mono-celestial universe, a world without the terrifying shadows of chaos, where the sun's unwavering light was the only divine truth. Yet for all the cosmic ambition of Akhenaten's solar revolution, its rigid focus on a single celestial body stood in stark contrast to the breathtakingly comprehensive vision preserved in one of Egypt's most remarkable and enduring texts, the Book of Nut. Where Akhenaten sought to simplify the cosmos, this ancient manuscript sought to explain its every intricate mechanism, known to the Egyptians as the fundamentals of the course of the stars. The Book of Nut is not a book in the modern sense, but a sprawling cosmological composition that was inscribed on tomb walls, papyri, and even inside coffin lids for over 1,000 years. It is arguably the most complete and sophisticated treatise on the functioning of the universe to survive from the ancient world, a 3,000-year-old guide that details the precise mechanics of the sun's perilous night journey, the complex movements of the stars and decans, and the vital role of the sky goddess herself in this eternal cycle. The entire cosmic drama of the Book of Nut revolves around its titular character, the goddess Nut. She is depicted in an iconic and unforgettable pose, her naked body elongated and arched over the earth god, Geb, who lies reclined beneath her. Her hands and feet touch the 4 cardinal points of the horizon, and her star-studded belly forms the very vault of the heavens. This image is far more than a static representation of the sky. It is a map of a dynamic, living process. The text explains that each evening, the sun god Ra, in his solar bark, enters Nut's mouth. He then travels through the dark, interior landscape of her body throughout the 12 hours of the night. This journey is not a peaceful cruise, but a perilous voyage through the Duat, the underworld, where he must overcome the forces of chaos led by the serpent Apep. Finally, at dawn, having been rejuvenated and reborn within the body of the goddess, he is born anew from her womb, appearing on the eastern horizon as the rejuvenated sun of a new day. This daily cycle of swallowing, journeying, and rebirth is the central pillar of Egyptian cosmology, and the Book of Nut provides a meticulous, almost scientific breakdown of its logistics. The text is filled with detailed annotations and captions that measure the goddess's body itself. Specific spells detail the exact time it takes for a celestial body to travel from one part of her anatomy to another. One fascinating section even calculates the volume of air believed to be inside Nut's body, quantifying the very breadth of the cosmos. This reflects the Egyptian mind at its most brilliant, seamlessly blending vivid mythology with a relentless drive to measure, calculate, and understand the universe in a rational way. The goddess is both a divine being and a cosmological schematic. Beyond the sun's journey, the book serves as an extensive manual for the stars, particularly those all-important decans. It catalogs their risings and settings with precise timing, outlining their role not just as timekeepers but as divine sentinels. Each decan star was believed to be a powerful entity, and the Book of Nut provides the knowledge required to safely pass by them during the nocturnal journey through the Duat. It details which stars are visible at specific hours of the night and for how many days each year they disappear from view, absorbed by the sun's glare. This information was absolutely critical for the soul of the deceased, who needed this celestial roadmap to navigate the afterlife successfully. To possess a copy of this text in your tomb was to carry the ultimate guidebook for eternal life, ensuring you knew the names of the star gods, the paths to take, and the correct spells to utter at every juncture of the perilous journey toward rebirth. And yet, even within this perfectly ordered solar universe envisioned by Akhenaten, there remained one celestial event so terrifying, so fundamentally disruptive, that it could shatter any sense of divine predictability: the solar eclipse. For a civilization that saw the sun's daily rebirth as the ultimate victory of order over chaos, watching that life-giving disk be systematically devoured by an unseen force was a moment of pure cosmological terror. This was not part of the plan. This was the great serpent Apep achieving a temporary and horrifying victory in the middle of the day, plunging the world into an unnatural, silent twilight. The ancient Egyptians understood the mechanics of an eclipse not in our modern astronomical terms, but through the lens of their relentless mythological struggle. They believed that each night, the sun god Ra faced a deadly battle as his bark journeyed through the underworld. The forces of chaos, led by the monstrous serpent Apep, would attack, attempting to halt the sun's progress and prevent the dawn. The priests in temples across Egypt performed nightly rituals to aid Ra in this fight, their chants and ceremonies serving as spiritual weapons to ensure the sun's rebirth. A solar eclipse was something entirely different and far more frightening. This was not a hidden nocturnal battle. This was Apep breaking free from the confines of the Duat and striking at the very heart of the divine order in the world of the living. The gradual swallowing of the solar disk was seen as the serpent physically consuming Ra's bark, and the sudden drop in temperature and the eerie silence that fell over the land were viewed as evidence that chaos was winning. While no explicit, detailed accounts of a solar eclipse survive on temple walls, perhaps because documenting such a triumph of chaos was itself considered dangerous, we find compelling clues in other texts. The phrasing used in funerary spells from the coffin text speaks of moments when clouds darken the sky and the sun's face is hidden in the daytime. More direct is a line from the much later Papyrus Laden, which references a ritual to be performed when the sun is eclipsed in the sky. This indicates that such events were not only observed, but had specific, prescribed ritual responses. The very lack of extensive records might be the most telling evidence of all. Documenting a temporary victory of chaos could be seen as giving it power, so the knowledge was likely kept within the closed circles of the high priesthood, passed down as oral tradition to be deployed only when the unthinkable happened. When an eclipse began, the priestly response was immediate and frantic. Their role as the maintainers of Maat demanded that they act to repel this cosmic invasion. Texts and reliefs describing the nightly battle against Apep give us a clear idea of what these emergency rituals would have entailed. Priests and the populace would have likely erupted into a cacophony of noise, beating drums, shaking sistrums, and shouting curses, all aimed at frightening the great serpent into disgorging the sun. They would have recited potent spells from the Book of Overthrowing Apep, a collection of incantations that involved drawing images of the serpent on papyrus that were then burned, stabbed with knives, and spat upon in a sympathetic magic ritual to weaken it. This was a full-scale spiritual counterattack, a desperate effort by the entire community to aid Ra in his struggle and restore the natural order before the world was plunged into permanent darkness. The event would have been interpreted as a dire omen, a sign that the pharaoh's divine power was wavering and that the balance of the universe was under grave threat. It was a moment that validated the entire Egyptian cosmological system. The constant struggle between order and chaos was not just a myth from the past, but a very real, very present battle that could be lost if vigilance ever slipped. The successful conclusion of an eclipse, with the sun slowly reappearing and warmth returning to the world, was not just a relief, it was a profound religious affirmation. It was proof that through correct ritual action and the power of the pharaoh, Maat had been restored once again. The temporary victory of chaos had been reversed, reinforcing the essential belief that even the most terrifying disruptions could be overcome by faith, knowledge, and the proper observance of sacred duties. But for all the celestial majesty of Karnak's open-air observatories, the ancient Egyptians also mastered a technology that brought the measure of the stars indoors, creating a portable, mechanical universe that could tick away the hours even when the sky was veiled by clouds. This marvel of engineering was the Klepsydra, or water clock, and the most sophisticated example ever discovered was found right within the Karnak temple complex itself. Unlike the simple bowls used elsewhere in the ancient world, the Karnak water clock was a masterpiece of astronomical calibration, a stone vessel designed not just to measure time, but to translate the eternal, shifting dance of the Deccan stars into a steady, reliable flow of water. Crafted from a single block of alabaster during the reign of Amenhotep III, this elegant instrument is deceptively simple in its appearance. It takes the form of a large, bucket-like vessel with a small hole drilled near its base. The principle was straightforward. As water slowly drained out through this hole, the dropping water level inside would indicate the passing hours against a scale carved into the interior wall. The true genius, however, lies in the intricate design of that interior scale. It is not a simple set of evenly spaced lines. Instead, the 12 hourly marks for each month are arranged in 12 distinct vertical columns, and the spacing between these marks changes from column to column. This complex, uneven grading is the clock's secret. it's a built-in computer that automatically corrects for the changing length of the nighttime hours throughout the year. In the ancient Egyptian timekeeping system, the period from dusk to dawn was always divided into 12 equal parts. This means that on a long winter night, each hour was much longer than a shorter hour on a summer night. A simple water clock with a uniform scale would have been useless half the year, measuring hours that were too long in summer and too short in winter. The Karnak clepsydra solved this with breathtaking elegance. The 12 columns correspond to the 12 months of the Egyptian year. The hour lines within the column for a summer month, when nights are short, are spaced widely apart. As the water level drops quickly through these larger intervals, it reflects the fact that a summer nighttime hour is brief. Conversely, the lines for a winter month are carved much closer together. The slower drop in water level between these narrowly spaced marks perfectly mirrors the drawn-out duration of a dark winter hour. By simply rotating the clock to align the current month's scale with a fixed sighting point, the priest could get an accurate hourly reading regardless of the season. This mechanical adjustment for seasonal hours is impressive enough, but the clock's connection to the stars reveals another layer of sophistication. The entire system was fundamentally calibrated against the very same Deccan stars observed from the temple courtyards. The rising of each new Deccan group marked the start of a new hour of the night. The water clock, therefore, had to be initially set and regularly checked against these stellar events. At the beginning of the night, a priest would start the water flowing at the moment the first Deccan star of the night was observed crossing the meridian. Throughout the night, as each subsequent Deccan transited, he could verify the clock's accuracy. The intricate scale inside the alabaster vessel is a permanent, material record of centuries of accumulated stellar observation, a conversion table that translates the complex motion of the heavens into a predictable, measurable flow of liquid. It allowed the precise timing of nocturnal rituals to continue uninterrupted in enclosed chambers where the stars could not be seen, ensuring that the sacred ceremonies to uphold Maat were performed at the exact correct moment every single night of the year. Deep in the heart of the Great Sand Sea, a vast and unforgiving ocean of dunes on the border of modern-day Egypt and Libya, lies a mystery as shimmering and enigmatic as the stars themselves. Scattered across the desert floor are countless pieces of a substance that seems utterly out of place, shards of canary yellow glass, some as small as pebbles, others weighing as much as 50 pounds. This is Libyan desert glass, and its origin is a tale of cosmic violence. Scientific analysis confirms it was formed in an instant of almost unimaginable heat and pressure, around 29 million years ago, when a meteorite or comet likely vaporized upon impact with the Earth's atmosphere, superheating the desert sand beneath it into a searing wave of liquid silica that then cooled into this pure, natural glass. For the ancient Egyptians, who undoubtedly encountered this radiant material during their expeditions into the desert, it must have been a substance of profound wonder, a piece of the sky itself, fused with the earth, glittering under the sun with an otherworldly light. The timing of this cosmic event and the presence of this glass in a region the Egyptians knew well presents a fascinating possibility. While the initial impact occurred millions of years before humans walked the earth, the glass itself would have remained, strewn across the surface, a permanent and highly visible monument to that cataclysm. When we consider that one of the oldest known pieces of worked Libyan glass was found in the burial treasure of the boy King Tutankhamun, crafted into a stunning scarab pectoral at the center of his necklace, its significance becomes undeniable. This was no ordinary stone. Its inclusion in the most sacred of royal adornments signals that it was considered a substance of immense power and divinity. The Egyptians had access to countless beautiful gemstones, lapis lazuli, turquoise, carnelian, yet they chose this mysterious, sky-born glass for a piece that was meant to protect the pharaoh's soul in the afterlife. This suggests they knew it was different, they understood it was not of this world. This is where the line between geology and mythology begins to blur spectacularly. Could the knowledge of this event, a brilliant fireball streaking across the sky, followed by a thunderous explosion, and the discovery of a field of fused glass, have been preserved in the cultural memory of the early peoples of the Nile Valley? While the impact predates them, the evidence of it was all around them. It is not difficult to imagine a tribe of early hunter-gatherers or later Egyptian mineral scouts witnessing a lesser, secondary event, a later meteorite strike in the same region, for instance, that reactivated the legend. The sheer terror and awe of seeing such a celestial display would have been seared into the collective consciousness, evolving over generations into a core mythological truth. This leads us directly to one of the central tenets of Egyptian religion, the belief in the Benben stone. In the creation myth of Heliopolis, the first thing to emerge from the primordial waters of Nun was a mound of earth, the Benben. Upon this mound, the creator god Atum, or Ra, came into being. The Benben stone itself became the most sacred object in their theology, the prototype for the pyramidion capstones that topped every pyramid and obelisk, representing the rays of the sun solidifying into stone. Critically, the original Benben stone was described as having fallen from the sky. It was a betilia, a sacred meteorite. The Egyptians venerated objects that fell from heaven because they were tangible pieces of the divine realm. The most sacred part of the Temple of Heliopolis was known as the Mansion of the Benben, housing this holy object. Now, connect these powerful ideas. A people who already worship a stone that fell from the sky venture into the eastern desert and discover an entire field of a substance that is quite literally fused sand, a material that could only be created by a god-like force of fire. Libyan desert glass is the physical proof of a celestial impact. For the Egyptian priest astronomers, this glass would have been the ultimate validation of their myths. It was the solidified light and power of a solar deity, the physical evidence of a god's violent and creative power striking the earth. The discovery could have directly influenced the development of their belief system, cementing the connection between the sky gods and the land of Egypt itself. It provided a scientific, though they would say divine explanation for how the gods could reshape the world in an instant, raining down power and creation from the heavens. The impact of this discovery would have reverberated through their entire culture. It explains the incredible prestige of glass and faience in Egyptian art, materials that were painstakingly manufactured to mimic the effect of this divine, natural substance. It gives profound context to the magical potency ascribed to meteoritic iron, which they called iron from the sky, and used to craft daggers and talismans for pharaohs, believing it held the power of the gods. The Libyan glass enigma suggests that the Egyptians were not just stargazers, they were the world's first planetary scientists. They collected data points from the desert floor and wove them into their cosmology, creating a religion that was deeply empirical in its own way. They saw the evidence of cosmic violence and interpreted it not as a random accident, but as a purposeful act of creation, a testament to the sky gods' immense power that was literally embedded in the very ground they walked upon. While the grand architecture and precise clocks demonstrate a mastery of celestial mechanics, the soul of Egyptian astronomy was profoundly feminine. This was a cosmology where the primary creative and sustaining forces of the universe were not distant, patriarchal gods, but powerful, active goddesses who literally embodied the heavens and its most important stars. Where we see impersonal constellations, they saw the divine feminine in its most majestic forms, with goddesses like Isis, Hathor, and Nut playing the central roles in the cosmic drama that unfolded overhead every single night. The most brilliant example of this is the star we call Sirius, the brightest beacon in the night sky. To the Egyptians, this was never just a star, it was the goddess Isis herself, known as Sopdet. Her annual heliacal rising was the most anticipated event of the year, a moment of divine feminine intervention that signaled the life-giving Nile flood was imminent. In their mythology, Isis was the great magician, the devoted wife who used her incredible power to resurrect her murdered husband, Osiris, and protect their son, Horus. Her celestial manifestation as Sirius perfectly mirrored this role. Just as she brought Osiris back to life, her star's return from its 70-day absence in the glare of the sun brought life back to the parched land of Egypt. The inundation was seen as a direct result of her actions, with the floodwaters often referred to as the tears of Isis shed for her lost husband. This connection made her the ultimate celestial mother figure, whose grief and magic were directly responsible for the sustenance of the entire civilization, weaving the themes of loss, love, and resurrection directly into the fabric of the night sky. But the celestial feminine was not a singular entity, it was a complex tapestry of complementary powers. If Isis Sirius was the mother and magician, then the planet Venus was the goddess Hathor in her most radiant and accessible form. As the dazzling morning and evening star, Hathor embodied a different aspect of divine femininity, joy, love, beauty, and music. She was the patroness of celebration, the lady of drunkenness, and the mistress of the turquoise-colored malachite mines of Sinai. Her unpredictable dance back and forth across the horizon, appearing alternately at dawn and dusk, was seen not as a chaotic motion but as the joyful movement of a dancer. This association was so strong that her priestesses were known to use Sistrum's sacred rattles in their ceremonies, the jangling music mimicking the star's seemingly playful path. Unlike the summer, life-giving power of Isis, Hathor's celestial presence was one of celebration and ecstasy, a reminder that the cosmos contained not just cycles of death and rebirth, but also moments of pure, unadulterated joy and creative expression. Yet all of these celestial goddesses operated within a far greater divine framework, the body of the sky goddess, Nut. She was the ultimate embodiment of the cosmos, a deity so vast that her star-studded torso formed the very vault of the heavens. Depicted in a breathtaking arc over the earth god Geb, with her fingers and toes touching the four horizons, Nut was not a passive backdrop. She was an active, living entity who swallowed the sun god Ra each evening. He then journeyed through the 12 hours of the night within her body, battling the forces of chaos, only to be reborn from her womb at dawn. This daily cycle of consumption and rebirth framed the entire cosmic order as a process happening within the body of a goddess. Her role was absolutely fundamental. She was the conduit through which all regeneration and renewal occurred. The Deccan stars that marked the hours were not simply placed upon her, they were part of her, sailing across her belly in their own divine barks. This imagery placed the feminine principle at the very center of timekeeping and the maintenance of cosmic order, or Ma'at. The universe literally ran on a rhythm set within a goddess. This central role of goddesses in the celestial sphere had a direct and powerful impact on the lives of real Egyptian women. Unlike many ancient cultures, women in Egypt could hold significant religious authority, and the priesthood of major goddesses like Hathor was a domain where women held prominent and powerful positions. These priestesses were not merely caretakers of temples, they were the living embodiments of the goddesses on earth, responsible for performing the rituals that maintained harmony between the celestial and terrestrial realms. A high priestess of Hathor, for example, would have been seen as the human extension of the planet Venus, her rituals ensuring the goddess's benevolent influence continued to bless the land with beauty and abundance. This provided a unique avenue for women to attain education, influence, and spiritual power, all derived from the perceived connection between the divine feminine in the sky and its expression on earth. Ultimately, the Egyptian night sky was a narrative written in light, and its primary authors were goddesses, from the life-giving return of Isis, Sirius, to the joyful dance of Hathor, Venus, all set within the consuming and regenerating body of Nut. The feminine principle was the engine of the cosmos. It was the source of time, the catalyst for renewal, and the guarantee of both sustenance and celebration. This world, you offered a complete picture of the universe where power was not about domination, but about cycles, creativity, and interconnection, a celestial order sustained by the enduring, multifaceted power of the divine feminine. Yet the intellectual fire that illuminated the library was not confined to its scrolls. It was embodied by the thinkers who walked its halls, and few shone brighter than Eratosthenes of Cyrene. Appointed as the head librarian, he was a man of voracious curiosity, a true polymath who excelled in mathematics, geography, poetry, and astronomy. His most stunning achievement was born from a simple yet profound piece of information he encountered in the library's vast Egyptian collection. He read an account stating that in the southern city of Sin, modern-day Aswan, on the day of the summer solstice, the sun stood directly overhead at noon. A vertical stick would cast no shadow, and sunlight would shine straight down to the bottom of a deep well. Intrigued, he decided to test this in Alexandria on the same day and at the same time. He erected a gnomon, a vertical stick, and measured the angle of the shadow it cast. He found it was about 7 degrees, or 1/50th of a circle. This simple observation, powered by a key Greek insight that the Earth was a sphere, led to a staggering leap of logic. Eratosthenes reasoned that if the sun's rays are arriving virtually parallel, the difference in the shadow angles between the two cities must mean the Earth's surface is curved. The 7-degree difference represented the angular distance between Sin and Alexandria on the Earth's circumference. Knowing the overland distance between the two cities, a figure likely provided by royal surveyors or caravan masters whose records were housed in the library, he then performed a feat of breathtakingly elegant mathematics. If 7 degrees equals that distance, then 360 degrees, the full circle, must equal 50 times that distance. His calculation yielded a circumference of about 252,000 stadia. Depending on which standard of a stadion is used, his result was within an astonishing 1 to 16% of the actual Earth's circumference. This was not just a scientific triumph, it was a masterpiece of cross-cultural synthesis, combining Egyptian empirical observation with Greek geometrical reasoning to achieve something neither civilization could have accomplished alone. The work of charting the heavens also advanced dramatically within the museum's walls. While the Egyptians had their decans and the Babylonians their detailed records, the Greeks sought to create a comprehensive mathematical model of the cosmos. The star catalogue of Claudius Ptolemy, though compiled later, is the ultimate expression of this Alexandrian endeavor. His work, the Almagest, systematically listed over 1,000 stars, noting their positions and brightness with a precision never before attempted. But to do this, he and his predecessors built directly upon a foundation of much older knowledge. The very constellations they mapped were a direct inheritance from the Near East. The zodiac, so central to their system, was a Babylonian concept that had been thoroughly integrated into Egyptian cosmology as seen at Dendera. Ptolemy's catalogue was not a creation from nothing. It was the meticulous refinement of millennia of accumulated data, now organized within a powerful new Greek framework of spherical coordinates and mathematical prediction. This grand fusion of knowledge, however, was not destined to last. The great library and museum, for all their glory, eventually fell victim to the very political turmoil they sought to transcend. Fires, civil unrest, and a gradual decline in patronage over centuries scattered its scholars and consumed its collections. the physical heart of this intellectual experiment was silenced. But its mind could not be so easily extinguished. The legacy of Alexandria did not vanish, it migrated. The synthesized learning preserved in its scrolls, the Greek geometrical models married to Egyptian and Babylonian observational data, was carefully copied and translated, first into Arabic in centers like Baghdad's House of Wisdom, and centuries later into Latin. This preserved knowledge became the core of the Islamic Golden Age's astronomical advancements and eventually fueled the scientific revolution in Europe. The lost observatory of Alexandria, therefore, was never truly lost. Its greatest achievement was the creation of a universal language of science, a hybrid tradition of theory and observation that crossed cultural boundaries and laid the essential groundwork for all of modern astronomy, proving that the most profound truths about our universe are discovered not in isolation, but at the crossroads of world cultures. For centuries, our understanding of ancient Egyptian astronomy was pieced together from ground-level surveys, fragmented texts, and the visible alignments we could measure with theodolites and tape. We marveled at the Great Pyramid's near-perfect cardinal orientation and the solar spectacle at Abu Simbel, but we were essentially studying the tip of an iceberg, unaware of the vast, hidden structures lying just beneath the sand. The true revolution in Egyptology has arrived not with a new excavation, but from orbit. Modern satellite technology, particularly LiDAR light detection and ranging, and high-resolution multispectral imaging, is fundamentally rewriting our perception of their celestial precision, revealing that the ancient Egyptians engineered their sacred landscape with a level of coordination and accuracy that is nothing short of superhuman. LiDAR works by firing millions of laser pulses from an aircraft or satellite toward the ground. By measuring the time it takes for each pulse to bounce back, it constructs an incredibly detailed, three-dimensional topographical map of the surface, and crucially, it can peer beneath dense vegetation or penetrate shallow layers of sand to reveal the ghostly outlines of long-buried structures. This technology is like giving archaeologists X-ray vision, allowing them to see an entire ritual complex that is completely invisible to the naked eye. From space, satellites equipped with synthetic aperture radar and other sensors detect subtle differences in soil moisture and density, pinpointing the locations of buried mudbrick walls, ancient roads, and even silted-up canals. When you combine these two datasets, you don't just get a few new ruins, you get an entirely new map of ancient Egypt, a previously invisible network of processional causeways, satellite pyramids, and entire temples that have been lost for millennia. This flood of new data is revealing that the famous monuments we know are often just the central nodes in a vast, interconnected web of astronomical intentionality. A stunning example comes from the Giza Plateau itself. We've long known that the three Great Pyramids are arranged in a rough alignment that mirrors the three stars of Orion's belt. But recent geospatial analysis, powered by this precise new mapping, suggests the entire plateau's layout is far more complex. The causeways leading from the Nile floodplain up to the pyramids, once thought to be simple processional routes, are now shown to have specific, deliberate alignments. One theory posits that the causeway of Khafre's pyramid aligns with the horizon point where the sun would set on the summer solstice during its construction, turning the pathway into a monumental runway for the setting sun's rays to travel directly into the heart of the mortuary temple. Perhaps the most dramatic rediscovery involves the Great Sun Temple of Heliopolis, the cult center of the god Ra. For centuries, its exact size and importance were guesswork, as modern Cairo sprawled over its ruins. But satellite imagery has now delineated its true, massive footprint, confirming ancient accounts of its grandeur. Even more astonishingly, analysis shows that the main axis of the Heliopolis temple complex aligns not just with true north, but on a direct, intentional sightline with the distant step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, over 15 miles away. This wasn't just a random placement, it was a deliberate act of sacred geography, physically and symbolically connecting the power of the sun god at Heliopolis with the eternal resting place of a deified king from centuries earlier, creating a permanent axis of divine kingship across the horizon. This technology is also settling long-standing debates. The so-called air shafts of the Great Pyramid have been a source of speculation for over a century. Do they truly align with specific stars, or is it just coincidence, using the exact coordinates provided by laser scanning inside the pyramid and comparing them with sophisticated astronomical software that can recreate the night sky from 4,500 years ago? Researchers have been able to achieve a level of precision previously impossible. The evidence is now overwhelming. The southern shaft from the King's Chamber did indeed target the belt of Orion, the celestial Osiris, while the northern shaft aligned precisely with the pole star of the era, Alpha Draconis. The tiny margins of error measured are so small that they fall within the natural settling of the pyramid's immense stone blocks over millennia, meaning the original construction was even more accurate than we can measure today. They weren't just aiming in the general direction, they were hitting a celestial bullseye with Stone Age tools. Perhaps the most humbling realization from all this data is the sheer scale of their ambition. We used to study temples and pyramids as individual entities. We now understand that they were often designed as pairs or sets with precise geographical and astronomical relationships. A temple on the east bank of the Nile might have its mirror image, both in layout and celestial alignment, with a counterpart on the west bank, reflecting the daily journey of the sun from life to death. The new maps are revealing that what we thought were isolated monuments are actually the surviving pieces of a gargantuan, country-wide puzzle, a masterplan etched into the very soil of Egypt that align the flow of the Nile with the path of the sun and the cycles of the stars. Each new pass of a satellite adds another piece, revealing a civilization that didn't just build in harmony with the cosmos, they engineered their entire world to be a permanent, functioning reflection of it, a machine built of stone and sand designed to keep the universe in perfect, eternal balance. And so, as our journey through the cosmos of the ancients draws to a close, we're left with a breathtaking realization. The ancient Egyptians did not simply look up at the night sky, they listened to it, they conversed with it, and they built their entire civilization in its reflected light. This was not a primitive attempt to explain the unknown, but a profound and sophisticated fusion of disciplines we moderns keep separate, a seamless tapestry where precise science, deep spirituality, and monumental architecture were all threads of the same cosmic cloth. They used the unwavering mechanics of the stars to create calendars and clocks of astonishing accuracy, while simultaneously seeing in those same stars the journeys of their gods and the destiny of their pharaohs' souls. Their obelisks were both sundials and conduits for divine power. Their pyramids were both tombs and resurrection machines aimed at specific stars. Their temples were both places of worship and vast astronomical instruments. They lived in a universe that was alive, intelligent, and deeply interconnected, and their greatest achievement was learning how to harmonize their lives with its eternal, sacred rhythm. This celestial wisdom was the bedrock of one of history's most enduring cultures. It dictated the agricultural cycle that fed millions, it provided the divine justification for the pharaoh's rule, and it offered every individual a map to navigate the afterlife. By seeing the earth as a perfect mirror of the heavens, they created a world of profound meaning and order. The annual flood was not a random weather event, but the tears of the goddess Isis, heralded by the return of her star, Sirius. The unending circuit of the sun was not just an orbital period, but the daily death and rebirth of a god, fought for by priests in nightly rituals. In their worldview, humanity had an active, essential role to play in maintaining the balance of the universe itself, a concept they called Mat. Their astronomy was therefore the ultimate sacred science, a system of knowledge that gave them not just the power to predict, but the responsibility to participate. So the next time you find yourself beneath a blanket of stars, I invite you to try on an ancient Egyptian perspective. Look up at that same sky they observed over 4,000 years ago and see if you can perceive more than just distant suns. Can you glimpse the celestial Nile, the Milky Way, flowing across the heavens? Can you find Orion and imagine the soul of Osiris, or spot Sirius and picture the goddess Isis returning to bring life to the world? Can you appreciate that without telescopes or computers, a civilization measured the circumference of time itself, built structures aligned to the inch with the cosmos, and wove a story so compelling that we are still unraveling its secrets today? Their legacy is a powerful reminder that the drive to understand our place in the universe is humanity's oldest and most noble pursuit. Now, we turn the conversation over to you. Which of these ancient secrets resonated most deeply? Was it the star shafts of the Great Pyramid, the celestial dance of the planets, or the lost labyrinth of Hawara? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, thank you for exploring the mysteries of history with us.